All right, area of parallelograms. The area, or capital A, of a parallelogram equals the product, which remember is the answer to a multiplication problem, of its base, which we use a lowercase b to represent, and its height, which is represented by a lowercase h. Okay? So the formula that we use then is area equals base times height. When you're looking at a parallelogram, the base is going to be any side of that parallelogram. Okay? The height is the length of the segment that is perpendicular to the base with endpoints on opposite sides. So if we're using this side as our base, the height is going to be perpendicular, creating a right angle on both sides, okay, to that base. So the height is the perpendicular line segment to the base. So let's use our formula to complete an example for finding the area of a parallelogram. Your first step is to always write the basic formula. So since we know that it's a parallelogram, we're going to use area equals base times height. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to substitute in what we know. So 13 would represent the length of our base, and 5.8 is going to represent our height because it is perpendicular to our base. So 13 is our base we're substituting in, times our height, which is 5.8. And then from here we multiply 13 times 5.8, which is going to give you 75.4 centimeters squared. Area is always written in units squared, so we will always square units when we're dealing with area. Let's look at another example of finding the area of a parallelogram. So in this parallelogram, our first step is to write our formula, area equals base times height. And as we look at this, we can determine that 10.2 is our base. 10.2 would be the base. The perpendicular line segment from the base, the distance between the two bases, is 7. So we know that our base is 10.2, and then we substitute in our height times 7. And then from here it's a multiplication problem. 10.2 times 7, which equals 71.4 feet squared. Remember to square those units when we're finding area. You may want to pause the video at this point to try example 3 on your own, and then come back to it to see what the answer is. Okay, so let's look at number 3. On number 3, we know it's a parallelogram. We always start with writing our formula, area equals base times height. From here, we're going to look at what the length of our base is. The length of our base is 4. The height is that perpendicular line segment, which is 5 1/4. So 4 is what's being substituted for our base, and I'm going to substitute 5 1/4 for the height. Now we could change 5 1/4 to an improper fraction and put 4 over 1 and multiply. Or you could change 5 1/4 to a decimal, which would be 5.25, and then multiply. When you multiply, you get 21 yards squared. Remember to square those units. All right, now let's look at using our formula to find the height or the base of a parallelogram. So we're going to be working backwards and using algebra to help us solve for the height or the base of our parallelogram. In the first example, we have the area of a parallelogram is 120 square feet. If the base is 12 feet, what is the height? So your steps, okay, just like we did when we were finding the area, the first step is to always write the formula. We know that it's a parallelogram, so we're going to use the formula for a parallelogram, which is area equals base times height. Your next step is to substitute in the known values into the formula. Well, we know that the area of the parallelogram is 120, so I'm going to substitute in 120 for the area. We also know that the base is 12, so I'm going to substitute in 12 for the base. And we're trying to find the height, so I'm going to leave the height as h. This is our variable. So from here we have a one-step equation, and our third step is to solve the equation. Since we are multiplying by 12, in order to undo that, we have to divide by 12 to get h by itself. So I'm going to divide by 12 on both sides. Our 12s cancel out, So I'm left with 120 divided by 12, which is 10, okay, equals h, which is the height. So I've solved for the height, and now I know that the height is 12 feet since we used feet in our units. Okay, let's look at another example of this, and in this case, we'll be finding the base. So in the second example, the area of a parallelogram is 192 centimeters squared. The height is 16 centimeters. What is the base? Just like in the first problem, your first step is to always write the formula. So since it's a parallelogram, its area equals the base times the height. Your second step is to substitute in what you know. In the problem, it tells us the area is 192. Okay, what is the base? We don't know the base, so I'm going to leave that as B. And we know that the height is 16, so I'm going to substitute in 16 for the height. Your last step is to solve your equation. So we want to find the base. We want to get B by itself. In order to do that, we're going to need to divide by 16 to undo multiplying by 16, which means we need to divide by 16 on this side. Our 16s are going to cancel out. So what I'm left with is 192 divided by 16, which is 12, equals the base, the length of the base. And since centimeters are our units, we know that the length of the base is 12 centimeters. You may want to pause the video again and try number 3 on your own and then come back to it to see if you got it right. All right, let's try number 3. So the area of the parallelogram is 286 inches squared. The base is 22 inches. What is the height? First step, write your formula. Since it's a parallelogram, its area equals the base times the height. Your second step is to substitute in what you know. So we know that the area is 286. We know that the base is 22 inches. And we're trying to find the height, so we're going to leave that as h. That's our variable. Last step is to solve the equation. So in order to solve for h, we're going to divide both sides by 22. Our 22's cancel out, and I'm left with 286 divided by 22, which is 13, equals h. Since we're dealing in inches, I know that the height is 13 inches. Please write down any questions you may have, and we'll go over those in class tomorrow.